Okay, so we have actually two guests today that are coming to check us out. So Saxton, we have to be on our good behavior. And Juno, I hate to ruin this for you, but no, we don't do shower buddies. Okay? So stop asking for it. It causes us problems. So if you're wondering, those of you on camera, about this cake, apparently one of the students had a birthday party, hoodie, and a happy birthday, and the students honored me with some pieces of cake, which I will eat off camera. So the Kuzari, for those of you who never heard of the Kuzari, is a book written in the 11th and 12th century by a Jew living in Spain called Rabbi Halevi. He was one of the four greatest Hebrew poets of all times, particularly in the golden age of Spain. He wrote this book later in his life, where he tries to explain Judaism systematically. And we've been studying this text from the beginning of Zman, and we're on the third treatise. And if you're interested, for those of you who are checking us out, you could listen to the entire, up to this. All the shiurim are on YouTube, with easy to get to. It's very simple. Just search for my name. There are Kuzari from 8 years ago, and this is the Kuzari from today. You'll see the difference. So, okay. So we talked about yesterday about the mitzvot system, that the rabbi explains the king that even if we come up with rational laws to govern society, what human beings fail to do is have the right measures. And he gave examples upon examples for us as to how the Torah, since it's being divine, that the Kadosh Baruch Hu is telling us where the limits are, where are the boundaries, in order for us to achieve not truth, because that's not the goal in Judaism. The goal in Judaism is to achieve holiness. And in order to become holy, a person must have divinely ordained boundaries. There are individuals who believe that they can impose boundaries on themselves. But those are human-made boundaries. So that those other religions who seem to copy Judaism, they are human products, where human beings are trying to borrow boundaries from Judaism and try to apply it to their lives. So the Kuzari says, when we started talking about the two major examples of what kept the Jewish people Jewish, is Shabbat and Yomim Tovim. The fact that the Torah gave us Shabbos and the holidays, where there is cessation of labor, we don't work. It's a day where we focus on our spirituality and not necessarily on physicality. So that allows for us to maintain our independent identity no matter what. You can live in Poland, you can live in Yemen, you can live in Iran, and you can live in America. If you hold fast to Shabbat, Shabbat will protect your Jewish identity. Questions? Good. Baruch Hashem. He says, if you did not have Shabbat and Yamim Tovim, there would be no sense of community. On Shabbat, people change their clothes. You wear nice clothes. You come together as a community to a shul, to a synagogue, to read the Torah. And if we didn't have that, no Jews would ever change their clothes and get together. They would be so depressed because of the oppression that they're under, that slowly, over time, their identity would simply be withered away. And he says, but now, since you have one day of oneg, of pleasure, where you have an ability to redefine yourselves, focus on what's important, it means that he says that you have 1/6 of your life, 1/6 of your life you are investing in resting and developing your spirituality. That's the minimum, gentlemen. Which means if you want to invest more, no one's going to hold you back. No one's going to say, well, you shouldn't really work on your spirituality. It says the rest of the people can't achieve this because they don't have this concept. They don't have designated time in their lives where they stop and focus on what's important, which is our spiritual development. So he says, the rabbi responds to the king and says, you know, the pious person who maintains and observes all of the commands that God commanded, such as milah. What is milah? What? Covenant. But what is it? Circumcision, right? By the way, and we do not do circumcision checks either. I keep forgetting to warn the new guys. What do you look disappointed, Eitan? Haran, don't worry. You're in already. He's like, and so, a pious Jew is the one that maintains Milah, Shabbat, the holidays, all the laws. He stays away from arayas, which is illicit sexual relations. He maintains observance, staying away from kilaim. Kilaim is when you're planting different species. Or kilaim in beged, in your clothes, which means that you don't wear shatnez. Does everybody know what shatnez is? No. What is shatnez? What? Wool and linen together. Correct. Correct. We do not mix that. Do you know why we don't mix it? Good. Because we just don't. I think there's a bigger... The Rambam brings about examples of idol worshippers. That idol worshippers, the way they would get their deities to intervene was by breaking the natural order in nature. Nature has certain order, male and female, right? Natural order is that milk is nourishing. Well, what they would do is they would cook a kid in its mother's milk. That is, take that which nourishes and use it to kill the kid, the goat, that the mother was supposed to, and in order to get the deities to intervene. In the book of Kings, it tells us about Elijah. Confronting the false prophets of Baal. And when they couldn't conjure up their deity, they started cutting themselves. That is, causing themselves to bleed, which is again changing the natural order of things. So shatnez seemed to be also, it's sort of, you're conflating two different categories and putting them together that you shouldn't. So he says a person would keep Shemitah. What is Shemitah? The 7th year, we're letting the land rest. Remain keeping it fallow. And Yovel, what's Yovel? 49th year. 49th, the 50th, right? Good. So that you keep Yovel, which is a special year as you count to let the land rest, and then all property returns to their original owners. And all the slaves go home. And you stay away from Avodah Zarah and anything that is connected. And he does not seek that which is hidden. Which means what? What does that mean? He doesn't seek what's hidden. He doesn't use witchcraft or prophecy to try to figure out things that he doesn't know. Which means that we should have plain emunah. What's emunah? Faith in God. Trust Him. Does He run the show? Yes? Moshe, really? Does He? Yeah. Okay. So if something that you're not happy with happens, now what? It is from Hashem, which means that He's right and you're wrong. It's pasha, it's simple. Kadosh Baruch Hu is right. Always. Yes, sir.
If he's right in everything that he does, and he knows like this is the best thing for you, then what's the point of even praying for like this thing to not happen, or like to continue?
So we talked a little bit about this yesterday and the day before. So I could technically send you to watch the shiurim that maybe you missed, but I won't do that. I won't do that. The function of prayer is not only to let Hashem know your situation. Because if that's the case, doesn't God know your situation? Yeah. So then why do you need to tell Him? He already knows. He knows that you need money. He knows that you need a shitta. He knows it. So why isn't He giving it to you?
Right.
What?
Right.
So that you would pray for Him. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. That's one model. But the model of prayer is also an opportunity for you to recalibrate what's important in your life. It is a meditative process where you are internalizing. That's Rav Rashar Hirsch. Raphael Shimshon Hirsch brings this idea when he explains the word pilel. He says that really prayer is you're taking these concepts and internalizing them, bringing it into you. It's not you going out to Hashem, but rather you are changing yourself. It's a time where you are working on yourself. So that's one possible answer. So he says, he doesn't turn to any of these idol worshippers or to magicians or to augurs or psychics. Why do psychics always ask your name? If they're psychics, shouldn't they know your name? Right? Or they have on their door, they're closed. I was just coming, you know. You didn't know that I was coming. Do you have psychics in South Africa?
Not to my knowledge.
Mm.
So very possibly that there is.
In LA, they used to have like a storefront. You know, there's like a store, psychic. You know, you'd go in and you pay, and then they would hold your hand. I don't know what they would do. So they would stay away from that. Why? Because they have emunah. They have faith in Hashem and they have bitachon. Now, you know, I'm going to say something that some of you are not going to be too happy with me, but it is emes. Bitachon is trusting God, not that everything that will happen to you will be good. It might not be. But you trust that whatever Hashem brings upon you is what is needed. Nowhere does it say that we're guaranteed to have an easy, great life with $50 billion. Nowhere does it say that. Maybe that's not your purpose here. So the Chazon Ish says, Bitachon in Hashem is knowing that whatever is happening to you, that is what needs to happen to you. Not necessarily that it's going to be great. It might not all be cake with cherry on it. It might be very uncomfortable, very tough. But that's what Hashem says. So we got to take it. Yeah. And so, the Chassid stays away from Nida, from animals that are impure, that he only eats kosher, good hechshers, stays away from tzarat, doesn't eat blood or chalev, which is animal fat. He's very careful to offer the sacrifices that are required. And that if he sinned b'shoigeg and he has to bring a chatas, a korban sin offering, he brings it. He also is very careful with Meiser Rishon, Meiser Sheni, Meiser Oni. When he goes to Yerushalayim, he brings a korban, rayon. He is very careful on korban Pesach. He's diligent about sukkah, lulav, shofar, all these things that are needed. He's very, very clear. He keeps the mitzvot of Hashem to the extent that he can. And this is an attitude towards mitzvot. In the Jewish world, we have different attitudes towards commandments. There is I'm just using that as an example. I don't want people to write letters and complain. On the left spectrum, there are people who say, when you have a mitzvah, I guess, if there's a way of a loophole of getting around it, then you could use it. Use the loophole. And that attitude looks at mitzvot as taxes. I got to pay a tax. If I can't get out of the tax, I'll pay. But if there's a way for me to get out of paying, then that's what I'm going to do. But on the right side, there's an attitude that they're not taxes. Each mitzvah is an opportunity to connect to Hashem. Each mitzvah is when we do the will of Hashem. This is what He wants. So take, for example, a very famous mitzvah that's always used as an example for this. Tzitzit. Do you have to wear tzitzis? What? You went like this. You don't have to wear it. Well, you only have to wear it if you wear a four-cornered garment. Correct? So if you don't wear a four-cornered garment, you don't have to wear tzitzit. Okay? If you're wearing a t-shirt, do you have to put on tzitzit on it? No. Why? Because it doesn't have corners. Now, comes the Gemara and the poskim and tell us you have a mitzvah to wear tzitzit. Which means what? That you should put on a four-cornered garment so that you should wear tzitzit. Why? Because God gave you a mitzvah. And that mitzvah creates a connection between you and Hashem. And so says Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, a pious person does his best to the extent that's possible to fulfill every mitzvah that comes to him. And we have lots of mitzvot. We usually categorize them in two categories. For example, prohibitive and prescriptive. Prohibitive are called lo taseh, mitzvot, that these things you shouldn't do. Prohibitive. And prescriptive is that God prescribes a certain behavior. Okay? That's one way. You can divide them in lots of different ways. If you want a puzzle, there's a way to divide all of the mitzvot into two categories, where in one category you only have one mitzvah, and all the other 612 are in another category. Okay? I'm not giving you the answer, so don't worry. You could think about it on your own. Little brain teaser. And actually there are two ways to do this, to answer this riddle. There are two answers. So if you come up with one, you should find the other one. So he says, the ultimate purpose of the mitzvot is that we can stand before Hashem and we say, I have not transgressed your mitzvot, which is a pasuk in Deuteronomy, in Dvarim, in chapter 26. And then we have mitzvot that are social. Lo tirtzach, shall not murder. How many of you violated that purpose? That one. Good, thank God. You did?
I embarrassed somebody once.
Once.
This is bad.
Once today. Probably not a good idea to take your phone to the mikveh to take photos. And then post them on...
There's Instagram videos, like asking questions to the Hasidim about when they do all those...
Anything that is, Shmuel with Instagram, and then anything after that is done. How's Yuda feeling? I heard that he's not feeling well.
Okay, it's good.
It's okay? So we have don't steal, respect your parents, loving your fellow Jew, loving the converts, not to lie, not to lend money and collect ribis, interest. There's lots of mitzvot of that category. And then we have mitzvot that are rational. What do we mean by that? So he says, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. I am the Lord your God. That's rational. Any rational person recognizes that there is God for this universe. And that you shall not have any other gods. That's also rational. And he says, Emunah is also rational. Because as you see in the Torah, God knows what is happening in the world and He knows what every person is thinking. And He knows their actions and their statements. And He pays them according to their behavior. That's called midah keneged midah, measure for measure.
Karma.
When you walk by, slap him on the back of his head.
You got a head to it.
Yes, sir.
What about your thoughts? Good
My thoughts?
thoughts are good thoughts rewarded too, or just actions?
Well, it depends. If you're laying in bed, thinking, I'm going to do a lot of good today. I'm really going to do a lot of good. I am, after I take a 7-hour nap. But you want a reward for that?
No, not those thoughts, but like thoughts.
That's a thought.
Okay, but
So give me a better example of what you had in mind.
I don't know, thoughts about Hashem,
Thought about Hashem.
Yeah, you're thinking about your relationship with Hashem, or maybe doing chesed, or
Well, if you try, the question is like this. If you lay in bed thinking, I'm going to give tzedakah today, I'm going to give tzedakah, you didn't do anything related to your thought, what exactly do you want? if you made a decision that you're going to go visit somebody who is ill. So you get on the train, you go to Hadassah, you knock on the door, and the nurse says, shh, he's asleep. And you can't do the mitzvah. That you would get credit, as if you did it. Yes, sir.
I was gonna say, like, it's like a mitzvah not to covet or something? So that's like your thoughts, you know?
It's a mitzvah not to covet. It's a lotase.
Yeah.
That you shouldn't covet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not to, but it's still like your thoughts are kind of, by you not coveting, you not having these thoughts.
No, that's not how it works. There's no mitzvah aseh. It just says don't covet. Don't desire what's not yours. Which is a very hard mitzvah to keep. Because it requires tremendous control. There are three, really four, but three realms in a human being. There's the realm of action, the realm of speech, and the realm of thought. So emotions is probably in between thought and speech. The easiest to control are your actions. Correct? When a policeman pulls you over at 2 a.m., you don't get out of the car and start slapping him in the face. You know not to do that. You're in control. It's a little harder to control your mouth. Sometimes we say things that later on we regret. Right? Especially to people who are close to us. It's a lot easier to be nice to complete strangers than to people who we're close to. It's very, very hard to always be nice to family. Because they're annoying. Your roommate is always annoying. So, a little friction here and there. But let's say when you meet a girl the first time, you're not very polite. How are you? Pull the chair, sit down. And 25 years later, the battle is to maintain this level of cordiality and politeness and being a mensch, even to people you're very close and familiar with. The hardest is to control your thoughts. That's the hardest. Because our mind runs, right? You're supposed to pray. So when you're standing in prayer, you have the sitter and all of a sudden you're thinking of things. You're in Dubai running around on some camel, who knows where. And then all of a sudden you catch yourself, oh wait, where am I? I'm back here. Okay, back to work. It's very hard to control our thoughts. Very hard. So, it's a battle. Emotions are also required to be controlled. For example, I'll just give you two examples, very simple examples. When the month of Adar comes, what are you supposed to increase? Simcha, which means you got to now put it in gear and be in happiness mode. When Rosh Chodesh Av enters, what do you have to do? Reduce it. Mema'atin b'simcha. It means you got to take it down, which means you have to have control over it. You can't just, walk to shul on Tisha B'Av and start having giggles. Start giggling and everyone is reading the kinois and, crying and thinking about all the terrible things that happen, and you're like giggling and laughing, high-fiving people in the back. That's not going to work. You have to have control. You have to have control of your emotions. Anger. That has to be controlled. Anger is an expression of arrogance. Because a person who gets angry thinks that the world has to be according to him. He's in charge. Why is this guy in front of me in the car? Doesn't he know the road belongs to my father? Get out of the way. Unfortunately, emotions are also very hard to control. There's something in Western culture now called triggers. Right? So if Reuven says something to Shimon and Shimon feels X, it is Reuven's fault because he triggered the feeling in Shimon. Just think about that. It means Shimon had no control over his own emotions, and he blames Reuven for the emotions that he supposedly caused in Shimon. Why don't you work on yourself, Mr. Shimon? So he called you a name. So what? Toughen up, Buttercup. This triggers is another way to control other people by saying, hey, I'm important, so you have to walk on eggshells. Don't say this, don't say that, because that triggers me. That reminds me of my mother and my grandmother and my whatever. Who knows? The fact that we should be sensitive in our speech and make sure, of course, there's no question. But you can't blame other people for your inability to control yourself. Yes, sir.
Do you have any advice on working on your thoughts?
Yes. Don't think about it. Well, you have to focus on what you're thinking. You have to pay attention to what's happening here. And it's about working on your ability to concentrate. And you have to also distinguish between imagination and thinking. Imagination is not exactly thinking. It's a different process. Imagination gets us into a lot of trouble. We imagine things that sometimes if we would have used our intellect, we would have figured out that we have the wrong interpretation of what's happening. That's why there's one of the major principles in Judaism is to always judge another person favorably. L'kaf zchut. So that you don't jump to conclusions by saying, hey, this, that. But it's a matter of control. A matter of looking at a situation and trying to interpret everything even though it doesn't appear to make sense. Could it be that it's like this? And say, okay, so maybe that's what happens. And if it turns out to be so, then you're like, great. And if it doesn't, and it turns out to be that you judged favorably, but the guy really meant this, so okay, so what happened? What happened? So, Rabbi Yehuda Levi tells us, the chassid, a pious person, says, he doesn't do an action or doesn't say anything or think of it without understanding and knowing that God is watching him and that God would reward him for the good or the bad. Now that's a high madrega to live in. Are we holding at that level? That before we think, speak, or act, we say, does Hashem want me to do this? But that's the ultimate goal to reach. That all your actions, all your words, all your thoughts you are evaluating yourself according to what is the will of Hashem. If you're going to say something, let's say Azriel wants to say something to Shmuel. So he has to think of it. Am I saying something that is positive, that is good, is going to make him feel good about himself? Or if the answer is no, then should I say it? What's the point? What am I trying to achieve? Hurt his feelings? Do I want Hashem to bring that upon me? Now if you're sadistic and say, yes, I want that to me. Well, then who says that he wants that? Sada? Everybody with me on that? So, you might think that this person then is gloomy, sitting in a corner by himself, right? Eating peanut butter sandwiches. No. This person is sameach, happy. He's elevated because of his connecting to Hashem. He's not shunning away from people. He's working on himself to make sure that he is doing right by other people. And he wants to do good. And he says that the emunah that the chassid lives by fulfills the statement in Pirkei Avos that a person should look at three things and you will not come to sin. Know what is above you. There's an eye that sees what you do, an ear that hears what you say, and all of your actions are written down in a book. There's a world that we're going to go after 120 years in this world, and they are going to go through every day, opening it and go, what about this? What about that? And what are you going to do? Say, that wasn't me. Come on, Hashem. Hook me up here. It's Olam HaEmes because it's Emes. There's Gemara, a couple of places, or one of them is in Masechet Shabbos, that the Gemara asks, what will they ask you in Shamayim when you get there? So there's a little bit of a machlekes what the first question is. I can tell you what the second question is going to be. Why are you stuttering? That's what they're going to ask you, because they're going to say, did you set times to learn Torah? And you're going to be, what? Did you make money be'emunah? So live your life in such a way that you're fulfilling the will of Hashem and make Hashem happy and proud of you. Mincha, gentlemen.